This is what a jailbroken OLED switch looks like. Now, at the time of me recording this video, within a couple weeks, the people that make the Switch are going to reveal a version 2 or a Switch Pro. Things are going to change a lot in the coming weeks, but right now, this is the best Switch that you could possibly get. It has all the functionality of the original V1 Switch in terms of being jailbroken, with the amazing OLED screen and the battery upgrades and the efficiency upgrades. But considering I've had this thing for well over a year and a half, but I've only really recently fell in love with it and actually used it a lot, I'm kind of start this video out with just a general review of the Switch in 2024. Because honestly, this is the first time I've ever genuinely experienced this console. Because like I said, I previously didn't use it basically at all. That being said, this thing is extremely fun. It has a bunch of games and exclusives that are really fun to play, and I've actually found myself really liking. Some of the titles, which are from the company's name that I cannot say, the names of the titles I cannot say, and the name of the series I cannot say, but you can infer what I'm talking about, most notably The Italian Plumber. And if you're wondering why throughout this video I'm refraining from saying the name of the company that makes the Switch and not showing any official gameplay or logos, it's because this video can be copyright striked and will be copyright striked if they have anything to use against me. Now, getting into some of the features of the console, the battery life is actually really good, especially compared to something like a Steam Deck. Even when my Switch is pushed to its absolute maximum, it still has somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 times more total battery life than the Steam Deck does. But I don't have an OLED Steam Deck because my Steam Deck is an older model with an LCD panel, so the Switch screen just blows it away. I think the Switch screen is genuinely amazing looking. Even though it's only 720p, it doesn't matter. The insane colors just make it so much nicer. With the pros out of the way, this console is certainly showing its age. Almost every mainstream title is running at only 30 FPS, with performance drops, and I'm genuinely not sure how long developers can support this hardware or make new games for this hardware, because it's just so incredibly weak. And we'll get to that later in the guide as I go through some of the benchmarks and testing that I did. But that's where the jailbreak comes in. Because if you haven't heard by now, you can overclock these switches. And what that means is, effectively, you're taking the clock speeds that it runs at and boosting them up, improving performance by an insane amount. And while technically to some degree this isn't really overclocking so much as it is bringing it back to factory performance standards, because again, the company that makes these dialed them back for the purposes of heat and battery life, it still does incredible things to performance. But any old V1 original Switch can do that. But this thing has an advantage, that being that it has the updated process architecture of the Americo, which means I can see clock speeds as high as 2.3 gigahertz on the CPU, which is a full 1.3 gigahertz boost over the stock clocks. Similarly, I can get 1.25 gigahertz on the GPU, triple that of regular handheld mode and nearly double of regular docked mode. And finally, I got nearly a 1 gigahertz overclock on the memory to 2400 megahertz with tightened timings. This is really important and possibly the biggest setting in terms of performance, because the CPU and the GPU on the Switch share a limited RAM pool, which means they are having to compete for bandwidth. So if you can open that bandwidth up, performance goes through the roof. But things don't end there, because if we could just overclock, that wouldn't really matter very much, considering the fact that almost all titles on the Switch, like I mentioned earlier, are locked at 30 FPS. But with a couple plugins and a couple patches downloaded off the internet, you can get almost any game running at 60 FPS stable with an overclock. We're talking Breath of the Wild, or some of my new favorites are Red Dead Redemption 1 and Skyrim. I got them both running at a locked 60 FPS, and don't get me wrong, it dials back the handheld battery life by a lot, but by a lot means from 4 or 5 hours to 2.5 to 3 hours, which again is so much better than even the Steam Deck can do. And pushing hardware to its limits like this is something that I love doing, almost more than gaming itself, which is why I fell in love with finding titles on the Switch, trying to unlock them, and then trying to see how fast I can push my clock speeds to see if I can get a maintained 60 FPS. And so far, there hasn't been any games that really do not run at the higher FPS. And still talking about just the regular functions of the Switch that I've enhanced, custom themes are awesome. I found a dark mode theme that I really enjoy. I've also found a very convincing PS5 theme that looks fantastic to me and alters a lot of the ways that the system works. Although that being said, I wish I had the knowledge, or I wish somebody else would do it for me, to have an animated background that looks exactly like the PlayStation, because it would sell the thing 100 times more. Now, to kind of round out this chapter, I do want to talk about something and give a disclaimer. Bans are absolutely possible. In fact, if you are not careful, they're almost a guarantee. Now, to be fair, my Switch has the custom firmware running entirely on an SD card. Also, my custom firmware is blocked from talking to the company's servers, which means that I can't view the eShop, I can't view news, and overall communication should be basically nothing, which is good because that way the company can't find out that you're using hacked products unless you mess up really bad and try to play an online game or go into custom firmware not on the SD card, not on the actual main chip of the system. But of course, there is always the option to just boot straight back into original firmware with no unsigned code, no modifications, and you should be able to play it just like a normal Switch with no problems at all. But now with that little disclaimer out of the way, remember to like and subscribe because I'm a growing channel and I really need your help to get monetized. Alright, on to the fun stuff. Now, after being jailbroken, there's two other entirely different operating systems that it can handle. The cooler, but the least useful in my opinion, is Ubuntu. This means that your Switch can boot into natively run Linux. Not only that though, in docked mode it can run at a 4K 60 FPS output, which is absolutely insane because having 4K natively on the Switch is something that I never thought I would have saw. Now with Ubuntu, there are cool things that you can do. You can use it just like a regular desktop, although a mouse and keyboard are almost needed just because of the clunkiness of the interface when you're trying to use touch controls. You also, provided that you alter the config files, you can overclock it. So of course I did that. Now personally, I haven't found any uses for it, but that being said, there's a nearly viral video on YouTube of some guy turning his Switch into a Steam Deck where he got Steam running and games running on Ubuntu. Just not at a playable frame rate, which is why it doesn't actually make me want to do it myself, considering the complexity involved in the process. Now here comes the part that I really was excited for. Android 11 on the Switch. And, of course, it's running natively on the Switch, and it works absolutely fine. Of course, in the config files I had to overclock it again because why wouldn't you? But after running some benchmarks, even fully overclocked to its potential, this thing loses to modern phones really bad. And this is where my doubts of future support for this system come into play. In Geekbench 5, compared to my now 2-year-old Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 S22, the S22 has a 4 times faster single core speed and about a 3.5 times faster multi-core speed. And while Geekbench didn't have a comparison yet, the S24 Ultra is going to blow both of those systems out of the water, to the point where the S24 Ultra might even be able to emulate Switch games almost as good as natively running Switch. But that being said, it's still really not that bad, and on Android 11 I haven't noticed any hiccups or performance problems at all. It's extremely smooth. And as for Android, I have a lot more uses for it. First and foremost, Android is designed to be controlled with a touchscreen, so it is so much easier to navigate the operating system without having to set it up in dock mode and have a keyboard and a mouse and blah blah blah. Also, because the bootloader isn't locked or anything like that, I was able to root this device in 5 minutes. It wasn't hard at all. Now for most people, the most prevalent use is going to be game streaming. And while for me, this feature isn't really that relevant, for anybody that has even closer to modern internet, this is a game changer. You might have seen the thumbnail of the video where I was running GTA 5 on the Switch, and that is real. I was really streaming GTA 5 from my PlayStation 5 to my Switch. And not only can it stream PS5 games, which with a handy app called PS Play, you can stream outside of your network too. With the Xbox app, you can do Xbox game streaming from just about anywhere, as well as Steam Link, which means you can play Steam games from anywhere. This turns your Switch into a powerhouse, especially on your local network if you want to play a PS5 game in your bed or you want to play a Steam game in the living room. And of course, because it's Android, it runs Android games just fine. PUBG Mobile and Call of Duty had no problems running, and one of my favorite mobile games of all time, Pixel Gun 3D, was able to run without any flaws at all. In fact, in the process of setting it up, I actually got back into my old account that is completely and totally legitimate. Games like Clash of Clans and the iconic mobile games like Subway Surfers or otherwise will run just fine on this hardware, which presents another interesting use case for it. You see, if I install these mobile games on my Switch, I can have them completely separate from my main phone, which means they won't be eating up storage, battery, or wasting my time, while I have all of them downloaded somewhere where I can easily play them along with my other games. Now to sort of bring the video to a close, I do want to talk about the value proposition of this thing. I bought this OLED unit from GameStop about a year and a half ago for roughly $300 after tax. And now again, because of the copyright restrictions, I have to be very vague about this. But I was able to find someone online who said that they would mod my Switch for me, which for the record is absolutely risky, and I do not recommend that you do this at all because there is a high chance that you could get scammed. But I used PayPal, so I knew I would at least get my money back if I was getting scammed, and from the reviews, I figured that I was not. And added all together, that cost me about $175 to have the mod chip fully installed and custom firmware loaded. So, give or take a little bit, the price equals out to about $500 in total for this unit. Do I recommend this? Absolutely not, especially now with the news of the version 2 Switch coming out. So what do I recommend? Well, I think first of all, we should all wait to see what happens with the announcements. There could be nothing, or there could be something like a Switch Pro, which just updates this generation to better hardware, but the games stay the same. But either way, you might either want to wait on this new console, or wait to allow the prices for the current generation to drop. But if you absolutely can't wait, I would recommend you go on eBay and find a version 1 moddable Switch. Those run for about $150 or so, and they should hold you over because they are easy to hack and relatively cheap. Alright, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. This thing is awesome, and I'm definitely going to be using this console all the time now. Although I'll be eagerly waiting the new console launch, and maybe one day when I get monetized, I can actually get the new console and jailbreak it and have another video like this. So if you'd like to see that, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I don't think we've hit 100 subscribers yet, so that would be a really nice milestone. Thank you for watching.